Two superpowers are locked in a quiet battle that will decide who controls the future, not with tanks or missiles but with algorithms and data. One side built the smartest machines first, the other figured out how to make them cheaper and faster, and somewhere in between, our jobs, our news, and maybe even our thoughts are being shaped by code we cannot see. So the real question is not just who wins, but what kind of world the winner creates. Now comes the full story in plain talk. The global race to dominate artificial intelligence has basically turned into the tech version of the Olympics, except the medals are power, money, and influence for decades to come, and right at the center we have the United States and China, two countries that could not be more different in how they run things, yet somehow are sprinting toward the same goal, both treating AI not just like a cool business opportunity but like a strategic weapon that can shape economies, militaries, and global influence. And here is where it gets messy. This rivalry is not just competition, it is also cooperation, like two rivals who secretly borrow each other's notes before the exam, and then accuse each other of cheating afterward. Recently, US officials have been raising alarms about large-scale efforts to extract capabilities from American AI models, basically saying someone is peeking under the hood and copying the engine, while on the other side, Chinese companies and institutions are saying, hold on, we are building our own stuff, we are innovating, we are collaborating globally. So it ends up with two completely different stories, both sounding confident. The truth, sitting awkwardly in the middle, makes it really hard to separate actual tech progress from political tension. If we really want to understand who might lead this race, we have to ignore the headlines for a second, because this is not just about who builds the smartest chatbot or the biggest model. It is about talent, infrastructure, data, money, regulation, and most importantly, who can turn all that into something people actually use in real life. Historically, the United States had a head start, no question. Its tech ecosystem has been like a magnet for innovation, with companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and Meta leading the charge, backed by huge amounts of venture capital, top universities, and a culture that basically says, try crazy ideas and see what works. And that is exactly how we got breakthroughs in large language models and generative AI. And then along came ChatGPT, which suddenly made AI feel real to commonplace people, and that moment really cemented the idea that the US was ahead. But then China started closing the gap surprisingly fast, with companies like DeepSeek stepping in and building models that in some cases can compete with top US systems. But here is the twist. They often do it more efficiently, meaning cheaper, faster, less resource-hungry, which in the long run might matter more than just being slightly smarter, because what is the point of the smartest AI in the world if only a handful of companies can afford to run it? China's rise in AI did not just happen overnight. It is the result of years of planning, heavy investment, and strong government backing, with AI treated as a national priority, integrated into long-term strategies, and supported through tight coordination between universities, companies, and the state, which is very different from the US approach where private companies drive most of the innovation, and the government kind of tries to keep up, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And then we have one of the most controversial parts of this whole story, distillation, which sounds fancy but is basically a way for a smaller AI model to learn from a bigger one, like a student learning from a genius teacher, perfectly normal in machine learning, widely used, very useful, but also a bit controversial when it starts looking like copying homework instead of learning concepts. US companies argue that some players are using this method at massive scale to replicate advanced models without paying the full cost of developing them, while Chinese companies respond by saying, look, all innovation builds on previous knowledge, nobody is starting from zero, and again, the truth is probably somewhere in between, because that is how tech has always evolved, a mix of original ideas and smart adaptation. Now, beyond the software side, there is the hardware battle, which is just as important, if not more so, because AI runs on massive computing power, which means specialized chips. Here, the US has an advantage with companies like Nvidia producing the most advanced chips. So, what did the US do? It restricted exports of those chips to China to slow things down, which sounds logical, but had an interesting side effect. Instead of stopping progress, it forced Chinese companies to get creative, developing their own chips, and making their software more efficient. So in a way, the restriction might have unintentionally pushed innovation in a different direction, kind of like telling someone they cannot use a calculator, so they become really good at mental math. Then, there is data, the fuel of AI. China has a massive population and a highly digital society, which means a lot of data, and in some cases, fewer restrictions on how it can be used. As a result, the US also benefits from a more diverse set of global data sources and a broader internet ecosystem. So, the race is not just about quantity versus quality, it is about how that data is used, refined, and turned into something useful. Of course, we cannot talk about AI without talking about talent. The US has long been the top destination for researchers and engineers from around the world. Still, China is catching up fast by investing heavily in education and producing a huge number of skilled professionals. Interestingly, many talents have experience in both countries. However, rising tensions are starting to limit that exchange, which could slow things down for everyone, because less collaboration usually means less progress. Then comes regulation, where the US tends to be more flexible, trying to encourage innovation even if it risks moving too fast. At the same time, China takes a more controlled approach, which can speed up deployment in certain areas but might limit creativity in others. Notably, no system is perfect, it is really a trade-off between speed and control. On the business side, the US thrives on intense competition among private companies, which drives rapid breakthroughs but also high costs. For China, coordination and large-scale initiatives can be highly effective, but may reduce competition in some areas. All of this is happening on a global stage, where both countries are exporting their AI technologies and standards, trying to shape how the rest of the world adopts AI, because whoever sets the standards often ends up with long-term influence, just like in previous tech revolutions. That is why tools like ChatGPT and systems from DeepSeek are more than just products. They are symbols of two different approaches, one driven by open innovation and global reach, the other by efficiency and strategic coordination. And then there is the security angle. AI is not just about helping us write emails faster, it can also be used for cyber attacks, misinformation, and even military applications, which raises the stakes significantly, making governments much more cautious and anxious at the same time. It is worth noting that public perception also plays a role. In the US, there is a strong focus on individual rights and transparency, while in China, there is more emphasis on collective benefits and stability, and these values shape how AI is built and used. When people ask who is going to win this race, the honest answer is it depends on what is the definition of winning. If we define winning as having the most advanced cutting-edge models, the US probably still has the lead for now, but if winning means scaling AI across society and making it widely accessible, China has some serious advantages, and the most likely outcome is not a clear winner but a kind of dual leadership, where both countries dominate in different areas and keep pushing each other forward, which could be great for innovation but also risky if tensions get worse. We might even end up with two separate AI ecosystems, one led by the US and one by China, with different standards and technologies, which could make global collaboration harder, or we might see continued interdependence despite political disagreements because, at the end of the day, technology and business tend to find a way to stay connected. It is also important to remember that this is not just a two-player game. Other countries are investing heavily in AI and could influence the outcome. The world is more complicated than just the US versus China. In the end, the real question is not just who wins, but what kind of AI future we end up with, because different approaches to ethics, governance, and innovation will shape how AI impacts our lives. Maybe the AI race is not really a race with a finish line. It is more like an endless marathon where the terrain keeps changing, both sides keep adapting, and the outcome depends on a whole mix of technology, policy, economics, and a bit of human unpredictability. However, one thing is certain, the stakes are huge, as AI is going to reshape industries, economies, and global power in ways we are only starting to understand. So instead of expecting a single clear winner, it is probably more realistic to expect a world where multiple leaders coexist, each shaping different parts of the AI landscape, and the rivalry between the two nations is just one small but very visible piece of a much bigger, ongoing story.